Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Crit and Crit. I'm Scint,
I'm Axion.
and we are continuing our playthrough of Final Fantasy V and our discussion slash analysis of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's slash Philosopher's Stone. Last time we discussed our impressions of some of the characterization present in the first book, and we are going to look at that a little bit further with, honestly, it's one of my favorite pieces of oversimplified shorthand for a character's personality that I've run across in most fiction, which is to say the Sorting Hat and the Four Houses. You know, for a siren, she's not making very much noise. I was expecting at least a little wee-woo.
This is actually going to go very bad if Gallop doesn't get
Silenced?
unsilenced soon.
Oh, he's pink now.
Yeah, he's poisoned.
It's fine.
Sweet. He is able to cast again.
Yep, good thing you have your healer back.
Oh.
So, yeah. As mentioned a couple episodes ago, without exaggeration, I do honestly, when I make a new D&D character, and honestly just when I'm coming up with characters for other things as well, I sort them. I kind of think about which of the four houses they would probably be sorted into, because it's a fun indicator to kind of think about how they would start reacting to various problems and catalysts, because you put someone from any different house in that same position in a story and you will get a different outcome most of the time. And it's just a lot of fun to think about. So probably a good place to start was just running down what the four houses are according to the Sorting Hat. Do you want that Axion, or shall I?
I'll go ahead and do it. The Sorting Hat describes the four houses as Gryffindor is brave, and this is very summarized. Hufflepuff is loyal. Ravenclaw is clever, and Slytherin is ambitious.
Yeah, I'm actually going to pull up the rhyme for this because it's a little more than just that. So,
well, I did say it was very summarized.
Yes. You might belong to Gryffindor with well the brave at heart. Their daring, nerve, and chivalry set Gryffindors apart. So chivalry, I would think, also implies like a fairness of just a sense of fair play. Treat others fairly while you are doing brave things. You might belong in Hufflepuff, where they are just and loyal. Patient Hufflepuffs are true and unafraid of toil. So they're loyal, but they're also diligent and hard workers, which I think gets very often overlooked. Or yet in wise old Ravenclaw, if you were ready mind, where those of wit and learning will always find their kind. So Ravenclaw is the smart, possibly also just the crafty house, because it doesn't necessarily say we'll have the best grades. They might just like solving puzzles and learning things for the sake of it. Or perhaps in Slytherin you'll make your real friends. These cunning folk use any means to achieve their ends. So Slytherin is probably the least defined according to the Sorting Hat itself, because it literally just says they are cunning and will do whatever they can to come out on top, which is not exceptionally flattering if you've read any books ever.
I didn't want to do that.
This seems like it's going interestingly.
Ah, perfect timing. I can actually hurt her with this.
So, anyway, Harry is, along with Ron and Hermione and, well, the other Weasleys, sorted into Gryffindor House for bravery. And it's interesting because Harry is almost sorted into Slytherin. The Sorting Hat thinks he would do well there, but Harry says, please, no, I don't want to be a Slytherin. He literally doesn't care where he goes as long as it's not Slytherin, because he's heard from other people that Slytherin is just generally not a great place.
Not just that, but that all evil wizards have come from Slytherin. which may be an exaggeration, but may also be accurate. The story is very inconsistent as to whether or not that's truly true.
I think it might also be a case of not every author plans out an entire 7-book series from page 1 of book 1.
I mean, that's also very true.
So, yeah, I can give a little bit of a pass there. But, yeah, it does seem very, very overly reductive to just assume that, because it has kind of led to the overall impression, like, I speak as one of the fandom and someone who's been reading the books for years, of, you have protagonist house, this house exists, and designated villain house. Which, it's fine for, you know, a pretty straightforward, kids fantasy series, but it does very much open itself up to a lot of jokes and commentary with that.
Right.
So, it's interesting that Hermione does not end up in Ravenclaw, given that what we know about her is that she is very, 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 very much a studier. But, like, later books reveal that it thought about Ravenclaw for her. The Sorting Hat thought about Ravenclaw for her, but then ultimately decided Gryffindor. So,
Yep.
I'm not sure how many people influenced their own sorting like Harry did. I kind of wonder if Ron did, because he was worried about not getting in the same house as the rest of his family.
And that is kind of the thing that I was about to say, is that the Weasleys are all in Gryffindor, and to the point that it's kind of considered something that's just known and expected in Hogwarts among other students, especially those like Malfoy, who don't have a high opinion of the Weasley family, that, oh, red hair, freckles, you're a Weasley, you're gonna end up in Gryffindor, because that's where Weasleys end up. Ah, here's what I want.
Magic. It must be nice to just walk into a shop and say, I would like one magic, please.
I really should have bought Fire instead of Blizzard at the last store. It would have made the last section a little easier.
It's so uncharacteristic of you to not buy Fire at every opportunity you get.
I intended to go grind some money and then come back and buy the other starting magics, but I accidentally triggered the boss fight, and I couldn't go back.
Well, you lived. Oh, you're the boy who lived. But yeah, we don't really get much examination of any house beyond Gryffindor in the first book, because we don't really get a chance to leave Gryffindor. We know that Hufflepuff is there, we know that Ravenclaw is there, we know that Slytherin is basically disliked by the entire rest of the school. Snape plays favorites with them. McGonagall is head of Gryffindor House, but does not play favorites with them as much as the Gryffindors all wish she would. About the only thing she plays favorites with is regards to Quidditch. And even then, it's still just, okay, we'll bend the rules and let this first year have a broom and join the team, but I still am going to give you all of the detentions and take points away from you when you step out of line, Mr. Potter.
Yep.
So, I'm not sure if it's a good opportunity or not to kind of break sequence and talk about what we've learned about the other houses going forward in the series, which I'm not against it, but it will mean we do a little bit of verbal backtracking later, which if you're okay with that, I'm okay with that.
I'm fine with it. Let's go ahead.
Alright, so, we know a few of the Hufflepuffs that get sorted from this year, like Hannah Abbott will be important later in like book 5. I think she's one of the ones who ends up joining their little study group, so to speak. I remember that we learned that it's not a guarantee that family goes to the same house, because a pair of twin girls, Patil and Patil, one becomes a Gryffindor and the other is sorted into Ravenclaw. So the Sorting Hat really does take a lot of things into account, so to speak. I do find it interesting that there's always the perfect number of students for each house, so everybody gets the same number. Which a lot of people have overanalyzed and talked about how unsustainable the wizarding population in England must be, considering that if you get 10 new kids for each house. That's 40 new students a year, which is probably not super sustainable.
So 40 per house? That would be...
Nope, 40 per year.
Oh, 40 per year. Okay.
Remember, there were 5 Gryffindor boys and presumably 5 Gryffindor girls, and you can multiply that by 4, so you get 40 new students a year.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's...
But let's be fair, that is probably author taking a sanity check and saying, I don't want to come up with 300 new names for all of these students. We're just going to roll with it.
That's fair. That is fair.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, like, you can overanalyze the world building, and we probably will because this is YouTube, what do you expect? But for the sake of maintaining the story, some things you can just kind of... It doesn't matter so much. I've heard some authors say, like, you get one buy with your YA speculative fiction story, because after that we start having suspension of disbelief. And I don't think many children are going to pick up the book and go, you know, I don't believe this because the statistical analysis is just not it's just not sound at all.
Well, when you're right, you're right.
But yeah, so Hufflepuff is, again, the loyal house. They have their entrance by the kitchens, which, I mean, I want to be a Hufflepuff. How about you?
I've always seen myself as more of a Ravenclaw, but I can't say that I disagree that easy access to the kitchen is in any way a bad thing.
Yeah, Slytherins enter through the dungeons, and, well, we know quite a bit about them. They are the designated villain house. The first Slytherin we meet is Malfoy, with his cronies, who basically are wizard versions of Dudley and his friends, so, you know, they've already established themselves as the rich kid bullies. Snape, also head of Slytherin house, plays favorites. It's generally, like, we only see them from the perspective of someone who's not a part of their group, but you kind of get the impression that it's just not an overall pleasant place, and it's not until, honestly, really, really late in the series we start getting an attempt to make the Slytherins at all sympathetic with Professor Slughorn, which we'll talk about him more later, and thoughts more on that.
That reminds me, do we learn in the first book who the heads of the other 2 houses are? We've got McGonagall is in charge of Gryffindor and Snape in charge of Slytherin.
No, I don't think we learn that in the first book, but I know it's Sprout with Hufflepuff and Flitwick with Ravenclaw.
Gotcha. Yeah, I couldn't remember if that was in the first book or somewhere else.
Nope, you just kind of pick it up over as the series goes, and I can't remember which book all of it's in.
That's fair.
So, yeah. And then, obviously, Ravenclaw is up in one of the towers, and they are basically the puzzle dorm. So, like, you actually have to answer a puzzle to get inside, as we discover from Luna later on. It's not just a password like the rest of the school. So, you know, that's gotta be fun if you're one of the older kids coming back in late from, like, a study group or class or something, or practice, and you are exhausted and you just want to go to bed, and you get a Professor Layton puzzle, please move these matchsticks around if you want to go to bed, and you're just like, please, why do you do this to me? I mean, it's very in character for the house, but you gotta wonder.
Yeah. And I can see how that would be immensely exhausting and frustrating.
It would probably lead to someone being very much like me. I'm not going outside unless I absolutely must. I will take 20 books from the library. I will be here for the next 2 weeks. Leave me alone. I'm not doing another logic puzzle today. But yeah, Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw really don't get a lot of character development until midway to almost to the end of the series. Like, I think we actually start getting Hufflepuff developed in book 4 when the Triwizard Tournament hits and we have Cedric Diggory playing more of a role, so we get to hear a little bit more about Hufflepuff from an actual Hufflepuff.
Right.
So, but yeah, Ravenclaw kind of gets papered on a little bit later. Like, they're the least developed of the houses, I think. Though we get some with Luna. So it's, yeah, we don't really see the other two houses until over halfway through the series, which could just be because there was so much packed in with just the plot that had nothing to do with the world building, but on the other hand, it feels kind of cheap to have less characterization in that sense, because, well, again, protagonist house, antagonist house, side characters exist too, I guess.
Yeah, and it's, as I said earlier, I've always kind of identified a bit more with Ravenclaw, so it always felt kind of off that they basically get ignored.
And well, it's mostly because our main character isn't there and probably doesn't care that much. So, yeah, and I've kind of always fallen a little bit into the Ravenclaw, maybe a little bit of Slytherin as well, because I maintain that you should have made more sympathetic Slytherins early on. Because, come on, ambition is usually the reason things happen. Excess ambition is where things fall apart, but you need some degree of motivation, some degree of stick-to-itiveness, some initiative, or nothing's going to happen. If you have the grandstanders in Gryffindor, the nerds over in Ravenclaw, and the hard workers over in Hufflepuff just doing their own thing with no one to direct the boat, you're going to be going in circles forever. Because, you know, you need somebody to kind of take charge and have a vision for things, and I think a benevolent Slytherin could be placed in that position to actually prod something to happen. So, like, I honestly think it'd be really a fun thought exercise to come up with a villain for each house, because in excess, any quality could be made villainous. That's how they become a tragic flaw. Like, a Ravenclaw. Can you think of an evil Ravenclaw? I can.
I mean, like, any, like, evil puzzle master?
I was gonna go with just a mad scientist. It's, let's quote Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park here, you were so concerned about whether or not you could, you didn't stop to think about whether or not you should. I learned the magic to do this, and I'm gonna see if it works, and now it's trying to kill us. My bad. Hufflepuff's main quality? Loyalty. Right?
Yep. Loyal to the
stalking.
wrong person.
Or stalking.
You took that in a way darker way than I did.
Either one could work. Like, you take that loyalty to the exact wrong degree. And then you have Gryffindor, whose main quality is being brave.
Which, that's just asking for trouble.
Yep. So if you have someone who's mainly concerned with, look, I can be a hero, I'm gonna do something awesome, I will do whatever it takes to make myself look awesome. It can kind of cross a little bit into maybe Slytherin-ish, but, you know, if all you're concerned about is being able to look like a hero, it doesn't necessarily mean you will be one.
It's a good way to end up in a situation where, like, you're... What's the word I'm looking for? Creating situations just so you could go in and be the hero.
Yep, engineering stuff, yeah, that could be an interesting way to do it. I don't know, it's just a fun thought exercise to me of, like, take a good quality and make a villain out of it, because don't most villains tend to think that they're the hero from their own perspective? It can make for... Yeah, it can make a really fun story or writing prompt if you're bored. Make an evil Gryffindor, make an evil Ravenclaw, make a benevolent Slytherin. I don't know, have fun with it.
I know, that's what I was looking for.
And interestingly enough, we do find out later that Dumbledore used to be head of Gryffindor House. Which, take that what you will, given what we know of Dumbledore.
It's not really surprising, but it's not really surprising in the sense that it really does seem like he favors Gryffindor. And,
I was thinking in the sense of, like, since we've already discussed that Dumbledore has a habit of withholding information and only giving it out piece by piece, it can kind of set up, some ideas.
Ah, yes, this fight.
Ferris go down the hole.
She got back up.
Yep. And I'm actually not really sure what else to say about the houses themselves at the moment without giving away far, far too much about the rest of the story before we even get into the second book. We're not even partly done discussing the first one. So, do you have any parting thoughts?
Only to echo what we already said multiple times, that Gryffindor and Slytherin do take up way too much attention, and I'd love to see more sympathetic portrayals of Slytherins, or more just normal portrayals of Slytherins, and more of Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff in general. But yeah, I think that about wraps it up.
Yep. So we will pick us up next time. Until then, I'm Scint.
I'm Axion.
And there's a big ol' hole in the cliff.